Hey guys, it's Lexi and welcome back to my channel. I have decided that one of my top favorite tropes when it comes to fantasy, romance, all of that is the morally gray character, specifically with the males, the men. I don't know, I feel like it's a very common theme and I just love a character arc where they kind of stay a little dark and twisted towards the end, but they get redemption along the way so they're not as evil. My cat wants me to throw her string. I guess quick round of applause for this skirt when I return. Anyways, with that in mind, I created a list of my favorite morally gray characters in these books that I've read. I think there's only one that I still kind of hate, but like, yeah, we'll discuss that when I get to it. I think instead of me just grabbing all the books at one time, I'm just gonna pick them up as I go along because looking for the book in my bookshelves is exciting. Number one is The Prince of Heart, Jax in The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. So this collection, this trilogy was written based off of Caraval, which I'm actually going to be discussing later, but I feel like Jax just needs to start this video. He is the Prince of Hearts, but he has a curse. Anybody that he kisses dies, unless they just happen to be his true love. So yeah, he doesn't really have an open heart. He's very manipulative. He'll do whatever it takes to get what he wants. He's probably one of the most twisted and manipulative male characters we've seen in romance fantasy books. However, his redemption arc is amazing and it is a very slow burn between him and Evangeline, who's the love interest in the book. He's got a lot going on, and I mean, if you were cursed to where you couldn't kiss anybody without them dying, you'd probably be a little dark and twisted too. So I feel like his character arc makes sense. Sometimes with our morally gray characters, we don't really get a good backstory that explains why they are the way that they are, and this all sort of clicks for me. It is very slow burn. There's not really any like spicy heat. It's very, very enemies to lovers, and I think he's a great person to start this video off with because Jax just kind of tops them all. Number two is Rain in The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. He is not as gray as other characters, but he does things to achieve power, and he lies and betrays Aurea to sort of get to the point that he is in the next book, which I don't want to spoil. The reason he's so intense and scary is because of what he has to do. Like, he will literally knock down anybody who gets in his path. With that being said, he's also extremely loyal and loves very hard. So I love that sort of juxtaposition where you're reading about someone who's so, I don't know, like broody and evil and mean, but when it comes to the girl that they love, they just like melt into little puddles. And Rain sort of encompasses that. He's still a little dark though, and he still betrays the woman that he loves. And I feel like if you betray a woman that you love, you're definitely not the goodest of all the guys in the world. With that being said, Rain, you are on my list of morally gray characters, but we still love you because you're doing it for a good reason. Ish. So this next one I don't have a copy of because I read it on my Kindle. However, Carden in Cool Prince, he honestly kind of deserves his own video, and I could have started it with him, but I feel like when someone is morally gray, they still have some good in them, and honestly for like the first two books I saw nothing but like darkness. Carden is this, first of all, he has a tail. Let's not talk about that anymore. He is basically a bully to our main character. I forgot her name. It doesn't matter because we're talking about the men. He's a bully and he's evil and mean, and he uses people to get what he wants. He literally doesn't care about anything or anyone. He will watch the girl who he's gonna end up with, because it's kind of obvious. He will watch her be like kicked and laughed at and giggle, and then of course later when everything happens that it's very enemies to lovers. But he's like my number one op, honestly. If I ever had to be in that book and Carden was trying to woo me towards the end, I'd be like, no, you literally bullied me. You were a tyrant king heir person. I'm terrified of you and the things that you have done to people and the way that you use people to get what you want out of them and then drop them. Maybe more so on the evil side, but he does sort of have a character arc toward the end. It's kind of hard for me to forgive the way he treated our main character throughout the books because it's just so, I don't even know. If I were in The Cool Prince and I was the leading lady, I might have forgiven you, but I would not have fallen in love with you. Girl. Anyways, still I love the series. I think it was one of the fantasy books that I read super duper fast. I just wish she had ended up with someone that treated her better. Or that he, I don't know, was being manipulated into behaving that way. But he wasn't. It's just the way that he was. Okay, let's talk about Red Queen, specifically Maven. I feel like this one is 50-50 because there's a huge twist that sort of explains why Maven is this controlling, possessive, love-struck brother who turns into this tyrant king towards the end, but that's a huge spoiler, so I can't give that away. But there is like a love triangle in this book. It's between Mare, Maven, and Cal. Oh my gosh, why did I forget the name? Yeah. It's between Mare and then Maven and Cal, and those two are brothers. And it sort of seems like Mare's leaning toward Maven for a moment, and then a huge betrayal happens, and he just like locks into evil tyrant king mode. However, like I said, there's a big twist that I don't want to give away because when it happens, let it sink in. That sort of explains why he becomes this dark and twisted evil being, not the person that Mare met and not the person she was growing feelings for. I will talk about Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard all day, every day, because this is the first fantasy series that got me into reading and introduced me to morally great characters. Maven is the very first one. So if you need a very light-hearted book with like no spice, because Victoria doesn't do spice the way we're sort of becoming numb to. It's very like intense, just moments. She covers that well, and the love triangle eats. But yeah, if you need to read a book about a morally gray man who has a very good reason for doing the things that he's doing towards the end and has a huge redemption arc, ties everything together beautifully, give it a try. I promise you will not be disappointed, and I have such fond memories. Now I kind of want to read this again. Anyways, moving on. The second book I wanted to talk about is the Caraval series, specifically our masked dark entity named Legend. And his identity does get revealed, but it's a huge plot twist. So I don't want to spoil that because if you haven't read this, then you need to read it and enjoy it to its full maximum capacity. However, Legend is the creator of these games where you can like change your destiny. There's all kinds of magic and money and just all that, but there's a lot of dark underground stuff happening, and the way he sort of manipulates people into operating this game. It's very hard to explain without giving away the full perspective, but if you love a good identity reveal where someone that you thought you could trust ends up being someone sort of dark and twisted, this is a great series, specifically legendary. The first one is Caraval, and then this one is the second book, and it's based off of the other sister. Each book is in a different sister's perspective, and then also is sort of their love story. And of course, both these sisters kind of fall for questionable men. I feel like the collection as a whole could honestly fall under this category because all the men just happen to be morally gray. But when you find out who Legend is, you're like blown away. The redemption arc also eats. And like I said, this collection like separates into the Ballad of Never After, and some of these characters play like roles in that. The Ballad of Never After is more romance heavy, and this is more magic, whimsy, whodunit, who is it situation. I think I explained that well enough. You know, in case that wasn't obvious when I started this video, these are my favorite morally great characters. There are definitely other books with people who don't make good choices. However, they're not my favorites. These are my favorites. So, this is part of the Grishaverse, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, specifically Kaz Brekker. Now, if you've seen on Netflix or read the Shadow and Bone trilogy, this is connected to that universe. And yes, Shadow and Bone has some dark people in it, but they're not my favorite. They're kind of forgettable. Kaz Brekker, oh my gosh. I think he was written so beautifully, just understanding who he is as a person and why this 17-year-old becomes this formidable gang leader, and he's very closed off to love and to trusting people, but he sort of opens his heart a little bit to a certain someone. Not that anything really happens, because you'll notice he always has a cane and he wears gloves because he does not like touching people, which gets explained later in the book, and I feel like Leigh Bardugo covers it fantastically. He has so much depth to his character. It doesn't feel like someone who's like, oh, you're evil, deal with it. There's so much more that goes into it. Granted, if you're a 17-year-old gang leader, there's gotta be some reason that you ended up that way. Yes, you may be living in the sort of slums and the poor district of the area that your world is placed in. Not just anybody can become as powerful as Kaz Brekker does. Not so much heavy on the romance, but on the sort of team bonding, friendship, epic heist, mystery. This just covers all of that except for the romance. There's like a subtle romance plot, but I think the most they do is like hold hands. And that's fine. Honorable mention real quick is from Blood and Ash, specifically two different characters, Hawk and Castile. I don't want to say too much because there's just like a huge spoiler that explains why these men are these morally great people. I think it's just worth noting that they both have these relationships with Poppy, who's our virtuous maiden who shouldn't be doing anything unholy and should just be purely innocent. Hawk and Castile recognize that, but they really don't care. And they sort of lie to her about their identities and who they are and what they want from her, and of course end up falling in love even though she knows she shouldn't catch feelings for either of them. That's all. So this is an honorable mention, but there's just too much to say without spoiling it, but keep this in your radar. And then my final little questionable man is Aaron from the Shatter Me series. He is, let's just put it this way, if you've been on Book Talk and you see like Book Talk boyfriends, there's always going to be some sort of an Aaron mentioned, and 9 times out of 10 it's going to be this one, and if it's not, it should be. He's had a rough childhood. His dad is like the commander of something, the army or whatever, so he grew up under his dad's thumb, being sculpted into this stoic, hardcore man that he is today. He sees Juliet's power. I'm pretty sure her power is like if she touches someone, they die or almost die. He sees her as this sort of weapon at first. He kind of wants to use her, but then he also starts to see her as a person and realizes how much she's just been affected by what she can do. I think he has such an amazing character arc, and learning why he's just so crazy is very important to understanding his character. Yes, he still makes bad choices. Towards the end, it all kind of makes sense, and he sort of steps down from his tyrannical reign because his father is not an issue anymore, and he sort of does whatever it takes to help Juliet. So he's very loyal and passionate towards the end, but getting there is, whew, getting there is rough. He still deserves the attention, and I think if you want, this book series kind of reminds me of the Red Queen collection because it's not very spicy and it's more heavily based on the magic, and our main girl is trying to save a bunch of people, save the kingdom, and then the morally gray man just sort of follows behind and is changing and helping her along that path. So I hope that made sense. Aaron, I'm proud of you for changing. I always knew you could. Honestly, I think that brings me to the end of this video for now. Of course, the more that I read, the more I'm gonna find different characters to put in this. These are just my favorite, and honestly, with these people who make bad decisions and have a track record of just unfortunate stuff, explaining why they are the way that they are is what really makes or breaks it for me. A lot of these characters that are very popular now are just, you're told they're dark and twisted and arrogant, but you're never told why, and you're just supposed to be like, okay, I guess that's why they are. And I really appreciate it when the author actually dives into their background, into their actions, their thoughts, their feelings, because then it feels more real. It doesn't feel like they're just trying to push a trope, you know? So I feel like these accomplish that. Maybe I'm the only one with that opinion. Also, I was looking up like different people's opinions, and I saw some people say that Reese from ACOTAR is their like morally gray. Huh? No, he's not morally gray. I think if anything, he's very good because of everything he sacrificed to save his people and everything that he would sacrifice for them as their lord. So I will fight on that. These are all just my opinions. If you agree with them, let me know. If you don't let me know. But anyways, thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end of this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.